Good morning, 1 Corinthians day 3. So a lot of ethical kind of instructions Paul is giving to the church. He's now addressing certain issues that they were facing as a church. And obviously it's clear to us as we read chapters 5 to 7 that sexual immorality was a big problem in this church. And there was all sorts of things going on that you can pick up as you read through these chapters that Paul is now addressing. And we could pick up on many things that he talks about church discipline and the very intriguing comment he makes about when my spirit is with you, together with the power of the Lord Jesus in the local church, deliver this person who has committed such bad sexual immorality, deliver them to Satan for the destruction of their flesh so that their spirit may be saved in the day. I mean, we're talking about a spiritually powerful form of church discipline that somehow delivers this guy to Satan for the destruction of his body. I mean, I don't know. It's like, I don't even know what to say about that. There is no context for me in my own local church for that kind of powerful church discipline. But anyway, there it is. Then chapter 6, he's talking about how Christians are not to sue other Christians in court. Is there not a wise man among you who can judge these matters? And it's better actually just to let yourself to be cheated rather than go before an unbelieving judge as two believers. And he says, I say this to your shame. Then we get to chapter 7, in which Paul makes the case for celibacy. Now this is not something you hear. I've certainly never heard a sermon on why you should remain celibate. It's probably the quickest way to empty your church. But let's not pass over it, because this is what I really did notice this morning. The first signs of this are in chapter 7, and Paul is talking about principles of marriage, and he's saying to husbands and wives, don't deprive each other sexually unless with consent. If you both agree for a time that you as husband and wife might give yourself to prayer and fasting, but then come back together again physically in sexual intimacy so that you don't become tempted. And that's, I guess, another devotion we could have, is the importance of your sexual intimacy as a married couple. Don't let it drift, because it's going to head to problems. Get help if you need to, talk through it if you need to, but you need to be continually enjoying sexual intimacy with your husband or wife, if of course it's physically possible. Some couples, there's physical issues which make it impossible. And in the light of that, or in that context, Paul then says, but I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. For I wish that all men were even as I myself. So Paul was celibate. He never married, and he would have died as a virgin. And he says, I wish that all men had the same gift that I have. Now that's what we're getting to, that celibacy is a gift that certain people have. And it may be that as you listen to this devotion, you have that gift, and no one has ever given it a name, and so you've never recognized it. So let's talk about that. But each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. So Paul immediately says, I know that not everyone has this gift, and I'm not in the slightest telling everyone they've got to be celibate. But he says, I in a sense wish that everyone had this gift of celibacy that I have. And he goes on to explain why. Because you can serve the Lord far greater if you're unmarried. He says, but I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. For it's better to marry than to burn with passion. I remember having a guy tell me one time, Christianity, he was so angry with the Bible. He was once, he thought, a believer, kind of a church goer, and then he rebelled and gave up his commitment to the Lord. And this was the verse he threw at me. He said, it's ridiculous. It's better to marry than to burn with passion. What kind of... And he's kind of taking it in an isolated sense, like someone's feeling themselves sexually inflamed, looking at another person. Now they must marry, 18-year-olds should all just marry because they're all burning with passion. That's not what Paul is saying here. He's taking a long-term view of life in view. And he's saying there are certain people who, if they try to remain celibate for year after year after year, will burn with passion in their celibacy. They will continually be thinking about the opposite sex and noticing the opposite sex wherever they go, and struggling with sexual desire and wanting to marry. And Paul is saying, if that's the case with you, it's better to marry. But the converse is true, that there are some people whose libido, their sexual drive, is not strong. It is weak. And Paul says that could be the sign that you have a gift from God which will allow you, which will empower you to remain celibate without burning with passion. He then picks up that same theme toward the end of chapter 7, where he's talking about whether a father should give his virgin daughter as in marriage or not. He says, "But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, that you may serve the Lord without distraction." Okay, so I think I've made the point. It may be that you are called and gifted to be able to give yourself to a life of celibacy where you don't marry, and let that empower a life where you can run for the glory of God. There's a guy in the UK, I can't remember his name as I sit here. I think I may be corrected on this, but I think he does a huge youth event once a year called Soul Survivor. I think it's called Soul Survivor. Tens of thousands of young people join in some rural place in England on a field, and they have the most incredible Christian meeting, worship and preachers and this guy, I can see him in my mind, he's got this like afro. He has given himself to a life of celibacy, and he's used the extra time that he has, the freedom, the lack of pressure. Married life puts pressure on you. I mean, that's the point Paul is making. And he's used all of that freedom for the sake of the glory of God and serving the kingdom. And maybe that's you. God bless you. See you tomorrow.
I stood up, a 51-year-old man last year in front of, I know it was 700, 800, 1,000 teenage boys, and said, "I'm 51 years old and I've not slept with anyone, animal, vegetable or mineral, and I'm okay. I've survived." And they all clapped and cheered. Now, that we need to say there's a tyranny. There's a tyranny in this world that bombards us from the magazines, the TV, the films, which is you're less than a human being if you're not sleeping with someone. And that defines you. And that's not what defines a follower of Jesus. And actually the best way to make marriage work is to embrace the gift of celibacy until the gift of marriage. So it's to embrace the gift of celibacy in a positive way. And one of the things I say is, I am single, and sometimes that's tough. Sometimes it will be wonderful to go home and to have someone, if it's been a good day or a bad day, to tell it to. But actually, I chose to make the most of the life God's given me. And in September, I'm going to be best man at my 19th wedding. Now, there's not many people that can do that. I've been father of the bride once. I'm godfather to loads of their kids, my friends' kids. I've got deep and satisfying and wonderful friendships and relationships with couples in their 70s, with with young men and women, with middle-aged people, with all sorts all over the world. And I can give myself to those relationships in a way that I might not be able to if I was married. So it's kind of saying there's a positive to this. There really is. And the truth is, not everybody who's married is free of loneliness, is totally always happy. Marriage is hard work as well.